The forest roared around Rose as she raced through the thicket, her heart pounding in rhythm with her footsteps. Branches whipped at her face and the ground seemed to tremble beneath her boots. The shimmering glow of the enchanted moonlight barely broke through the dense canopy above, casting eerie shadows along the path. She had no time to lose. Her mission was clear, yet terrifying. The unicorn, the last of its kind, was gone, vanished into the depths of the forest, taken by a force darker than any legend she'd ever heard. The only clue she had was a single, glimmering feather, a mystical trace that led her deeper into the wilderness. But what she didn't know, what no one had ever told her, was that the forest itself was alive. It could feel fear, and it would prey on it. A rustle from behind snapped her attention back to the present. A shadow moved fast, too fast. Rose spun around, hand going to the hilt of her sword. Her breath caught in her chest. Nothing. She took a step forward, but the air was thick, like the entire forest was holding its breath. The feather glowed faintly in her hand, its light pulsing with each step she took. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet gave way. With a sharp gasp, Rose plunged into the earth, her body twisting as she fell deeper and deeper into the dark. The world above vanished, replaced by an eerie silence. She landed with a heavy thud, the breath knocked out of her lungs. Her fingers clenched instinctively around the feather, now glowing brighter than ever before. As Rose struggled to her feet, something shifted in the shadows. Unnatural, wrong. The air shimmered with an unnatural cold. "Rose!" A voice echoed from the depths of the cavern, low and menacing, but strangely familiar. Her pulse quickened. "Who's there?" Rose demanded, her voice steady but filled with an edge of uncertainty. Her grip on the feather tightened. The voice chuckled, the sound as cold as ice. "You've come too far, Rose, too far to turn back." Rose felt the air around her grow thick, suffocating her. But she didn't flinch. The mission was clear. Find the unicorn. Save it from whatever dark force had taken it, no matter the cost. "Tell me who you are," Rose demanded, stepping forward, determination burning in her eyes. The voice laughed again, closer this time, echoing from every direction. "I am the one who controls the forest. I am the reason your precious unicorn is no more." A sickening chill ran down Rose's spine. The ground shifted, and from the shadows emerged something that should not have been. An ethereal figure, a dark shape that stretched impossibly tall, with hollow eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The feather in Rose's hand flared to life, casting an intense glow that pushed the shadows back. "I will stop you," Rose vowed, every ounce of her being now focused on one single goal. The creature's hollow eyes locked onto hers, and the forest trembled as if it too held its breath. "You think you can stop me? This forest has no end, no boundaries, and neither do I." The creature stepped closer, its form flickering like smoke, its voice becoming a growl. But Rose didn't back down. With a fierce cry, she raised the glowing feather high. The light exploded outward, illuminating the cavern with the force of 1,000 suns. For a brief moment, everything stopped. The creature shrieked, a terrible sound that made Rose's skin crawl. The ground rumbled as if the entire forest itself was waking up, shaking the very earth beneath her feet. In that split second, Rose saw it, the unicorn, its glowing ethereal form trapped in the heart of the forest, glowing weakly under the oppressive darkness. It was too far away to reach, but its call to her was unmistakable. "Get out of my way!" Rose yelled, charging toward the creature, pushing past the waves of darkness that sought to drown her. With every step, the feather's light pulsed brighter, growing stronger. And as the creature recoiled in pain, Rose leaped forward, ready to face whatever lay ahead. But just as she reached the creature, everything went dark. The darkness wrapped around Rose like a suffocating blanket, her breath coming in short, frantic gasps. The ground beneath her feet had disappeared, and she felt herself falling, spiraling down through the void. But just as the fear threatened to consume her, a burst of light pierced the shadows, and the feather in her hand flared once again, guiding her downward. Rose's landing was softer this time, and she pushed herself up, finding herself standing in an unfamiliar landscape, a vast, glowing forest unlike any she had seen before. The trees here were tall, their trunks twisted and gnarled, the leaves shimmering in shades of silver and gold. There was no sound, no wind, only the distant murmur of an unseen stream. But something was wrong. The air felt too still, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Rose could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on her. Every instinct screamed for her to run, but she couldn't. Not yet. "Rose," the voice whispered again, now clearer, sharper, echoing around her from all directions. "You are in my domain now. There is no escaping the forest. There is no escaping me." Rose clenched her fists, her fingers tight around the glowing feather. The weight of the creature's words lingered, but she would not be swayed. She had come this far, and she would not turn back. Not when the unicorn's fate hung in the balance. Her eyes narrowed as she scanned the landscape, looking for any sign of the unicorn. She knew it was close. She could feel it. The creature's power was tied to the heart of the forest, and wherever it was, the unicorn could not be far behind. But the forest itself seemed to shift, bending and twisting in ways that made it impossible to navigate. "Who are you?" Rose called into the silence, her voice steady despite the unease bubbling in her chest. "What do you want with the unicorn?" There was a long pause, and then a low, guttural laugh echoed through the trees. "I am the keeper of shadows," the voice said, its tone like silk, wrapping itself around her mind. "And the unicorn? It is the key to unlocking the true power of this forest." The ground beneath her feet rumbled, sending a shiver through her spine. Rose's gaze darted to the horizon, and she saw it. Through the mist, a shadowy figure emerged. Tall, dark, and impossibly ancient, its eyes glowed with the same eerie light that had filled the cavern before. The Keeper of Shadows. "You're too late, Rose," the Keeper's voice echoed as the figure stepped closer, its form flickering like a fading dream. "The unicorn is mine, and with its power, I will reign over this world and every world that lies beyond. You cannot stop me." Rose's heart raced, but she refused to show fear. The Keeper might have the power of the forest behind it, but she had something stronger, determination, and a promise she made to the unicorn. "You're wrong," Rose said, her voice low but fierce. "I'll stop you, no matter what it takes." The Keeper's laugh echoed through the forest again. "You think you can defeat me? You, a mere mortal? You have no idea what you're dealing with." Before Rose could respond, the Keeper raised a hand, and the world around her twisted. The trees began to move, their branches creaking as if alive, reaching toward her with sinister intent. The air grew colder, the light dimmer, as shadows crept in from every corner, closing in on her. But Rose stood tall. She couldn't back down now. She had come too far. The feather in her hand pulsed with energy, the light growing brighter with each passing second. Rose raised it high, and the shadows recoiled, hissing in pain. She could feel the unicorn's presence now, the faint but unmistakable pull of its magic guiding her. "I'll find the unicorn," Rose muttered under her breath, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the forest. "And I'll set it free." The Keeper of Shadows grinned, its teeth sharp and glinting in the dim light. "You are welcome to try, Rose, but the deeper you go, the more you'll lose. The forest will consume you, just as it has consumed everything else. You cannot win." With a flick of its hand, the keeper disappeared into the shadows, leaving Rose alone in the eerie stillness of the forest. But she wasn't afraid. She knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but she had no choice. The unicorn needed her, and she would stop at nothing to save it. With renewed determination, Rose turned and started her journey deeper into the forest. The path was unclear, and the air was thick with an unnatural tension, but the glowing feather in her hand was her beacon. It would lead her to the unicorn, wherever it was hidden, and she would not let the Keeper of Shadows or the forest itself stop her. Rose stood frozen in the heart of the forest, her mind racing. The Keeper of Shadows had vanished, but its words lingered in the air like the faintest whispers of a forgotten nightmare. The forest around her was unnervingly silent, save for the distant hum of a mysterious current. But she couldn't let the fear seep in. Not now. A low rustle broke the stillness, and Rose instinctively dropped into a crouch, clutching the glowing feather in one hand and her other hand resting on the hilt of her knife. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. She couldn't be caught off guard in this strange and dangerous place. The rustling grew louder, and out of the shadows, a small figure emerged. Rose tensed, her grip tightening around the feather. She wasn't sure whether to expect another enemy or something else entirely. The creature that emerged was no threat, however. It was a small, fuzzy creature with oversized ears and bright, intelligent eyes. It stood on two legs, looking more like a hybrid of a rabbit and a squirrel. It tilted its head at Rose as though sizing her up. After a long moment, it spoke in a surprisingly clear voice. Well, what do we have here? A human in the forest of shadows, no less. Rose blinked in disbelief. A talking animal? Was she losing her mind? I'm not here to harm you, Rose said carefully, taking a step back. I'm looking for the unicorn. I need to find it, to save it from the Keeper of Shadows. The creature tilted its head once more, clearly puzzled. You're serious, aren't you? The Keeper? Well, you've certainly got guts, I'll give you that. It hopped closer, flicking its tail. Name's Thistle, by the way, and I know this forest better than anyone. If you're going to find that unicorn, you'll need help. It's not going to be easy. Rose eyed the small creature skeptically. Why would you help me? What's in it for you? Thistle's eyes gleamed with a mischievous sparkle. Well, for one, I don't particularly like the Keeper, too much gloom for my taste, and besides, Thistle added with a sly grin, this forest is far too quiet without a little chaos. You're going to need me. Trust me. Fine, Rose said, her gaze hardening with determination. But if you're going to help me, you need to keep up. Thistle puffed out his chest, clearly offended by the suggestion that he might slow her down. You don't know who you're dealing with. I'm quick on my feet. I'll be your eyes, your ears, your backup when you need it. And, he added with a wink, I know a few tricks. A reluctant smile tugged at Rose's lips. All right then, let's go. And so they set off deeper into the forest. The path ahead was winding, and the air felt heavier with each step, as if the trees were watching, waiting. But with Thistle by her side, Rose felt a little more at ease. Despite his quirks, the little creature was oddly comforting. The companionship was a small but welcome relief from the daunting task ahead. As they journeyed further, the forest around them seemed to change. The twisted trees became even more distorted, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers, brushing against the air. Shadows flickered in the corners of Rose's vision, disappearing the moment she turned her head. The deeper they went, the more alive the forest felt, alive with danger, alive with magic. So, Thistle said after a long silence, breaking Rose from her thoughts, tell me, what makes you think you can defeat the Keeper of Shadows? He's not someone you can just outsmart or outrun. Rose hesitated for a moment, considering his words. The Keeper of Shadows was a creature of unimaginable power. But she had a reason to fight. I have to. The unicorn's life is tied to this forest, to this world. If I don't stop the keeper, everything will be destroyed. Thistle paused and stared up at her with his large eyes. You're not just doing this for the unicorn, are you? He asked softly. There's more to it than that. You're doing it for all of us. Rose's heart clenched at his words. She hadn't realized it, but it was true. The forest, the creatures within it, and the balance of magic itself all depended on what happened here. You're right, she said quietly. I can't let the keeper destroy everything. I'll save the unicorn and I'll stop him, no matter the cost. Thistle's expression softened, a rare sincerity in his voice. You've got the spirit of a true adventurer, Rose. I like that. But the keeper's not going down easily. He's clever, and he controls this forest. You've got to be just as clever. Rose nodded, her resolve strengthening. I've got a plan. We'll outsmart him. Thistle chuckled, his whiskers twitching. Outsmart him? Oh, I'm looking forward to this. You've got to promise me one thing, though. When we're in the thick of it and things get tough, don't forget to laugh. Laughter is the best weapon in a dark place like this. Rose couldn't help but smile at the little creature's optimism. I'll remember that, she said, feeling a flicker of warmth in her chest. And don't worry, I'm not backing down. Not ever. They continued deeper into the forest, the path growing ever more treacherous. The trees now loomed above them like towering giants, their bark twisted into grotesque shapes. The air felt thick with magic, oppressive and heavy, as if something was watching them from the shadows. Suddenly, a low growl echoed from behind them, and Rose spun around, her hand instinctively reaching for her knife. Thistle darted to the side, his tiny form surprisingly fast. The sound grew louder, and a massive creature burst from the trees, a hulking, shadowy beast with glowing red eyes. It was the forest's guardian, a creature born from the keeper's magic, designed to hunt intruders. Run! Thistle shouted, his voice frantic. It's the beast of the shadows! We can't take it head on! We need to find cover! Rose didn't need any more encouragement. She grabbed Thistle and sprinted, her feet pounding the forest floor as the beast's growls echoed behind them. The trees around them twisted and turned, but Rose's mind was sharp. She could hear the beast's heavy footsteps getting closer, its breath hot on their heels. This way, Thistle yelled, pointing to a narrow gap between two trees. We can lose it if we make it through there. With no time to lose, Rose swerved into the gap, her heart racing. She felt the air shift behind her as the beast's growl turned into an angry roar. The trees around them seemed to bend, trying to close in, but Rose pushed forward, the glowing feather in her hand providing a sliver of light. For the moment, they had escaped. Panting and exhausted, Rose turned to Thistle. That was too close. What the heck was that? Thistle grinned, though his eyes were wide with excitement. The beast of the shadows, the keeper's personal guard dog, so to speak. Dangerous, but not invincible. We'll be all right. Just stick with me. Rose exhaled sharply, her chest still heaving. That was too close for comfort. But, Thistle said with a grin, we're alive, and we've got a long way to go. Ready to keep going? Rose didn't hesitate. Absolutely. Together they pressed on, deeper into the forest where danger and mystery awaited. But Rose felt a little more certain now. With Thistle by her side, she knew she wasn't alone. The forest felt darker now, more oppressive, as if the very air was charged with danger. With every step they took, the trees seemed to close in, their branches twisted into frightening shapes. The faint whispers of the forest's magic pulsed around them, unsettling and unfamiliar. But Rose's resolve never wavered. She had a mission, and she couldn't afford to get distracted. Thistle, perched on her shoulder, occasionally flitted his ears with nervous energy. It's not safe here, Rose, he said in a low voice. The deeper we go, the more we draw the keeper's attention. We need to be careful." "I know," Rose replied, her voice steady but sharp. "We've come this far. We'll figure it out." They pressed on, moving through the dense underbrush, navigating the dark paths with caution. As they ventured further, Rose could feel the forest growing colder, the energy shifting in the air. Strange creatures watched them from the shadows, eyes glowing eerily in the moonlight. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed through the ground, followed by the sound of something large approaching. Rose whipped her head around, her hand instinctively reaching for her blade. Thistle jumped from her shoulder and onto the ground, his little ears flicking as he searched for the source of the disturbance. "I don't like the sound of that," Thistle muttered. "We need to hide, now." Before Rose could react, the ground beneath them cracked, sending a shockwave through the forest. Out of the cracks, a large, shadowy creature rose, an enormous serpent made of the same swirling darkness that had once surrounded the keeper. Its eyes glowed with a fiery red, and its massive fangs gleamed in the dim light. Rose froze for a moment, her heart hammering in her chest. But then her instincts kicked in. She grabbed Thistle and sprinted, ducking behind a large boulder, just as the serpent's tail lashed out, narrowly missing them. The ground trembled with every movement of the creature, and the air was filled with the scent of damp earth and something more sinister. The serpent hissed, its voice a low, guttural growl. "You cannot escape," it whispered, its voice laced with a mocking tone. "The keeper knows you are here. The forest is his domain." Rose swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay calm. "We can't outrun it. We need to outsmart it." The forest felt darker now, more oppressive, as if the very air was charged with danger. With every step they took, the trees seemed to close in, their branches twisted into frightening shapes. The faint whispers of the forest's magic pulsed around them, unsettling and unfamiliar. But Rose's resolve never wavered. She had a mission, and she couldn't afford to get distracted. Thistle, perched on her shoulder, occasionally flitted his ears with nervous energy. "It's not safe here, Rose," he said in a low voice. "The deeper we go, the more we draw the keeper's attention. We need to be careful." "I know," Rose replied, her voice steady but sharp. "We've come this far. We'll figure it out." They pressed on, moving through the dense underbrush, navigating the dark paths with caution. As they ventured further, Rose could feel the forest growing colder, the energy shifting in the air. Strange creatures watched them from the shadows, eyes glowing eerily in the moonlight. Suddenly a low rumble echoed through the ground, followed by the sound of something large approaching. Rose whipped her head around, her hand instinctively reaching for her blade. Thistle jumped from her shoulder and onto the ground, his little ears flicking as he searched for the source of the disturbance. "I don't like the sound of that," Thistle muttered. "We need to hide. Now." Before Rose could react, the ground beneath them cracked, sending a shockwave through the forest. Out of the cracks, a large, shadowy creature rose, an enormous serpent made of the same swirling darkness that had once surrounded the keeper. Its eyes glowed with a fiery red, and its massive fangs gleamed in the dim light. Rose froze for a moment, her heart hammering in her chest. But then her instincts kicked in. She grabbed Thistle and sprinted, ducking behind a large boulder just as the serpent's tail lashed out, narrowly missing them. The ground trembled with every movement of the creature, and the air was filled with the scent of damp earth and something more sinister. The serpent hissed, its voice a low, guttural growl. "You cannot escape," it whispered, its voice laced with a mocking tone. "The keeper knows you are here. The forest is his domain." Rose swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay calm. "We can't outrun it. We need to outsmart it." Thistle peered out from behind the boulder, his eyes narrowed. "I've got an idea, but you'll need to trust me. When I give the signal, you run. I'll handle the rest." Rose nodded quickly. "What's the plan?" Thistle grinned, his tiny teeth showing. "It's simple. Just follow my lead." The serpent's massive body slithered closer, its head weaving back and forth like a snake stalking its prey. Rose could feel its piercing gaze on her, cold and unrelenting. Thistle leapt from the safety of the boulder and darted toward the serpent, his tiny form darting around the creature's head in a blur of motion. The serpent hissed in confusion, trying to focus on the speedy little creature. Rose, seeing her chance, sprang from her hiding place, running in the opposite direction, hoping to lure the serpent away. The serpent's head snapped toward her, its red eyes flashing with fury. It let out a deafening hiss, chasing after her with terrifying speed. Rose could hear the serpent's body crashing through the forest, the sound of its enormous form shifting the very ground beneath her feet. "Thistle!" Rose shouted, desperate. "Do it now!" Thistle's eyes gleamed mischievously as he dashed across the forest floor, weaving through the trees with unnatural agility. He darted toward the serpent's tail, and in one swift motion, he slapped a glowing seed against the ground. The seed burst into a bright flash of light, temporarily blinding the serpent and causing it to freeze in confusion. Rose seized the moment. She launched herself to the side, narrowly avoiding the serpent's snapping jaws. With all her strength, she hurled a branch she had grabbed earlier into the creature's gaping mouth. The serpent recoiled, its throat constricting around the foreign object. It let out a deafening roar, but it was enough to give Rose and Thistle the edge they needed. Rose reached the edge of a cliff and looked down. The chasm below seemed bottomless, a dark abyss that swirled with shadows. "Jump!" Thistle shouted, his voice laced with urgency. Rose hesitated only for a moment before sprinting forward and diving into the chasm, the wind rushing past her as she fell. The sound of the serpent's enraged roar echoed above her, but Rose focused on the fall, twisting and turning to avoid the jagged rocks below. At the last possible second, she managed to grab hold of a vine that hung from the cliffside. She swung to the side, narrowly avoiding a deadly fall. Her heart raced as she clung to the vine, but she refused to let go. "Rose!" Thistle called from the ledge above. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," she panted, catching her breath. "But we need to get out of here, fast." Thistle grinned. "Agreed. Let's go." With a steady hand, Rose pulled herself up the vine, her muscles aching with the effort. She reached the ledge just as the serpent's shadow loomed above them, ready to strike again. But the darkness seemed to be pulling back. Rose's heart skipped a beat as the ground around them shook once more. "Looks like the forest isn't so welcoming after all," Rose muttered. Thistle gave her a sly grin. "We haven't won yet, Rose, but we've bought ourselves a little time." The forest felt more alive than ever now. The path ahead would be fraught with danger, but Rose's spirit hadn't faltered. They had survived the first of many obstacles, and nothing, not even the keeper, could stop her now. "Let's keep moving," Rose said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "The unicorn's waiting." Thistle nodded, his eyes twinkling with determination. "You got it. But first, let's see what other mischief this forest has in store." They pressed forward, each step taking them deeper into the heart of the forest. The road ahead would be perilous, but with each challenge they overcame, Rose felt more certain that she could save the unicorn and the world before it was too late. The wind howled as Rose and Thistle made their way deeper into the cursed forest. The air grew thick with the scent of pine and something more sinister, a dark energy that swirled around them like an invisible storm. Each step felt like they were venturing further from safety, but Rose knew there was no turning back. The unicorn's magic was dying, and she was the only one who could save it. Suddenly, a rustling sound broke the eerie silence. Rose's instincts screamed at her to act. Without a word, she dropped to the ground, pulling Thistle with her. The forest held its breath, and then a blur of motion. A giant clawed paw shot out from the underbrush, missing them by mere inches. A massive creature, half hidden in shadow, emerged. It had the body of a wolf, but its fur was made of shifting black smoke. Eyes like burning embers stared down at them with hunger. Its growl rumbled like thunder. "Keep moving!" Rose hissed, scrambling to her feet. She didn't need to be told twice. The creature lunged, but Rose was already a step ahead, darting to the side. Thistle, perched on her shoulder, yelped, "That thing's fast! We need a plan, and fast!" Rose didn't answer. She was too focused. The ground beneath them trembled as the beast's claws scraped across the earth. "Jump!" she shouted. They vaulted over a large rock, landing in a clearing just ahead. The creature snarled, its eyes locked on them, but it hesitated for a split second. That was all the time they needed. Thistle jumped down from Rose's shoulder, his eyes narrowing. "I've got a few tricks up my sleeve," he muttered, darting toward a nearby bush. The wolf creature growled, its massive body twisting and jerking with frustration. It wasn't sure where to go. Its prey was gone, and the forest around it had become a labyrinth of shadow and movement. Rose took the opportunity. She grabbed a nearby vine and swung from one tree to the next, moving quickly and silently. The creature below was distracted, and Rose knew she could outmaneuver it. But just as she swung to a higher branch, a shadow darted past her. The creature had caught wind of her movement. It was fast, too fast. "Thistle!" Rose yelled. "Distract it now!" Thistle, who had been hiding behind a large fern, let out a shrill whistle. The wolf creature snapped its head toward the sound, eyes blazing. As it moved in the direction of the distraction, Rose used the moment to leap from her perch and sprint toward the edge of the clearing. Come on," she muttered to herself, eyes scanning for anything that could help them escape. A small stone bridge crossed a rushing stream ahead. It was their only chance. Without a second thought, Rose sprinted toward the bridge, Thistle following closely behind. The creature was hot on their heels, its claws tearing up the earth. As they reached the bridge, Rose made a split-second decision. She grabbed a large log and shoved it toward the creature, blocking its path. The beast collided with the log, knocking it aside with sheer force, but in that moment, Rose and Thistle reached the other side of the stream. The creature let out a frustrated howl and turned back, disappearing into the shadows of the forest. "That was too close," Rose said, breathless, her heart pounding. Thistle's tiny chest heaved as he caught his breath. "Tell me about it. But you handled it. I knew we were in for some trouble, but this forest, it's got a mind of its own." Rose nodded, wiping the sweat from her forehead. "Let's keep moving. We can't stop here." The forest seemed to close in around them again, but this time they were ready. Every step felt like they were being watched by unseen eyes, but Rose didn't falter. The unicorn needed them. They didn't get far before the next challenge emerged. This time, there was no growling beast, no shadowy creature. Instead, they were met by something even more unexpected, a field of flowers. But these were no ordinary flowers. They shimmered in the moonlight, their petals glowing with an otherworldly light. "That's strange," Thistle said, hovering near one of the flowers. "I've never seen anything like it." Rose knelt down, examining the flowers closely. "I've heard of these," she said softly. "They're called night-blooming seraphs. They're beautiful, but dangerous." Before Thistle could ask why, the flowers began to move. Their petals folded in on themselves, revealing sharp, needle-like thorns. The air around them seemed to pulse with a strange energy. Thistle's ears perked up. "These things are alive. They won't let us pass easily." Rose's eyes narrowed. "We have to get through. There's no other way." She reached into her pouch and pulled out a small vial filled with glowing liquid. "This is a potion of nightshade. It'll neutralize their magic, but we have to be quick." She uncorked the vial and threw the contents into the air. The liquid exploded in a burst of light, and for a moment the flowers went still. But then the petals began to twitch, and the air filled with a high-pitched hum. The night-blooming seraphs weren't defeated. They were only growing angrier. "Rose, look out!" Thistle shouted, pointing to the sky. From above, a massive swarm of thorn-covered vines descended, each one a deadly tendril reaching for them. Rose's heart raced, but she was already moving. She dodged the first few vines and sprinted toward the heart of the field, where the flowers were the densest. "We have to make it through before they completely regenerate," she yelled, her voice sharp with urgency. Thistle darted ahead, his small form weaving between the vines. He managed to grab a large vine with his claws and swung it over, knocking down several of the plants in the process. Rose followed his lead, leaping from vine to vine, using her agility to stay ahead of the deadly blooms. With a final burst of speed, they made it to the other side, breathing heavily, adrenaline coursing through their veins. "That was too close," Rose said, her voice shaky from the intensity of the encounter. Thistle gave her a sly grin. "You handled it just fine, but I think we're in for more surprises before this is over." Rose nodded. The danger wasn't over, not by a long shot. The forest had more challenges in store for them, and each one would push her to her limits. But she wasn't going to stop, not now. "Let's go," she said, determination settling in her chest. "We've still got a unicorn to save." And with that, they continued into the forest, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together. The silence of the forest was deafening, broken only by the distant howls of creatures lurking in the shadows. Rose stood at the edge of the clearing, her breath shallow, her senses heightened. The wind had died down, as if the very world was holding its breath in anticipation. In the center of the clearing stood the cursed stone pedestal, dark magic swirling around it like a storm cloud. It was here that Rose's greatest challenge awaited, a shadowy sorcerer, the mastermind behind the curse that had plagued the land. His name was Malgor, and his power was vast. His ability to bend the very fabric of reality to his will had made him a force of pure darkness, and it was he who had trapped the unicorn and held its essence captive. Rose's heart hammered in her chest as she stepped forward, her sword gleaming in the moonlight. The weight of the mission pressed heavily upon her. Time was running out. The last vestiges of the curse were about to engulf the world, and only by defeating Malgor could she hope to restore balance and save the unicorn. Suddenly, a cold laugh echoed through the forest, reverberating off the trees like a whispered promise of doom. "Did you think you could defeat me, little girl?" The voice was smooth and chilling, like the slithering of a serpent. "Your efforts are futile. The forest is mine. The curse is mine. You will never leave this place." From the shadows, Malgor emerged. He was a tall figure, cloaked in swirling black robes that seemed to absorb the light around him. His face was hidden beneath a hood, but his piercing eyes burned like twin coals, glowing with dark magic. His hands crackled with raw power as he raised them, sending a shockwave of dark energy surging through the air. Rose's sword glowed brighter in her grip, a beacon of defiance against the encroaching darkness. "You've stolen enough, Malgor," Rose called out, her voice steady despite the dread building in her chest. "Release the unicorn and end this curse." Malgor's laugh deepened, echoing through the clearing like a sinister wind. "The unicorn is mine, and soon, so will this world. You are too late, Rose. The spell is complete, and nothing can stop it now." He raised his hands, and the ground beneath Rose's feet began to crack, glowing with dark symbols. A pulse of energy erupted from the earth, sending Rose stumbling backward. The very forest seemed to bend to Malgor's will, the trees twisting and groaning as if in pain. Rose barely had time to regain her balance before Malgor launched a surge of dark magic at her. The blast hit with incredible force, sending her crashing to the ground. The wind was knocked out of her, and for a moment, the world around her spun in a blur of shadows. Thistle's voice broke through the haze, urgent and sharp. "Rose, get up! You can't let him win!" Rose pushed herself to her feet, shaking the dizziness from her head. She could feel the magic surging around her, a suffocating presence that sought to crush her spirit. But she was not afraid. She couldn't afford to be. The unicorn, her mission, was at stake. With a deep breath, she squared her shoulders and faced Malgor, who stood in the center of the clearing, his dark magic swirling like a storm around him. "You may have power, Malgor," she said, her voice steady despite the growing tension. "But you're not invincible." Malgor sneered, a flicker of arrogance crossing his face. "You speak of power as if you understand it. I have mastered the very forces of nature. You stand no chance against me." Before Rose could react, Malgor flung his hands out, sending bolts of dark energy hurling toward her. She leapt to the side, narrowly avoiding the blast. The trees around her groaned as they were struck, their bark blackened and curling into ashes. "You can dodge all you want," Malgor taunted, "but I will wear you down. You cannot escape." Rose's mind raced as she evaded another blast. She needed to think fast. Malgor's attacks were relentless, and the pressure of time was mounting. The curse was near its peak, and if she didn't act now, it would consume everything. Her eyes darted around the clearing, looking for anything that could give her an advantage. And then she saw it, a large ancient tree off to the side, its roots twisting into the ground in an intricate pattern. The tree was old, its trunk covered in glowing runes. It was a relic of the forest's magic, a source of power that might just be able to counter Malgor's dark influence. "Thistle!" Rose called, her voice filled with determination. "Distract him! I'll need a few moments." Thistle, his tiny wings buzzing with urgency, swooped into the air and darted toward Malgor, drawing the sorcerer's attention. Malgor growled in frustration, raising his hand to strike, but Thistle was too quick, ducking and weaving through the air with incredible agility. Rose didn't waste another second. She sprinted toward the ancient tree, her feet pounding the earth. She could feel the magic of the forest pulsing in the air, urging her on. As she reached the tree, she placed her hand on its bark, her fingers brushing the runes. The ancient power surged into her, a wave of light that filled her with strength and clarity. She could feel it. The magic of the forest was alive within her now. She had become a conduit for its power. With a determined breath, Rose turned back toward Malgor, her sword glowing with the newfound energy. The sorcerer had noticed her move and was already preparing another blast of dark magic, his hands crackling with raw power, but Rose was faster. She charged toward him, her sword raised high, a streak of brilliant light cutting through the darkness. Malgor's eyes widened in shock as she closed the distance between them. "You cannot defeat me!" he screamed, raising his hands to unleash one final wave of dark energy. But it was too late. Rose slashed her sword through the air, unleashing the full force of the forest's magic. A burst of light erupted from the blade, engulfing Malgor in a blinding flash. The dark magic surrounding him shattered like glass, his form disintegrating into nothingness. The clearing fell silent once more. Rose stood panting, her sword lowered, her body trembling from the intensity of the battle. Thistle fluttered down to her side, his small form perched on her shoulder. "We did it," Thistle said, his voice filled with awe. Rose nodded, her eyes scanning the clearing, now bathed in the soft glow of the moon. Malgor was gone, but the forest still felt heavy with the remnants of his magic. The curse had been broken, but the work wasn't finished. The unicorn, her true quest, was still waiting. "We did," she said quietly, "but there's still more to do. The unicorn needs us." With renewed resolve, Rose turned toward the heart of the forest, her sword held steady in her hand. The battle was won, but her journey was far from over. And as she stepped forward, the forest seemed to respond, its trees shifting, the air lightening, as if welcoming her back into its embrace. Rose knew that the road ahead would be just as dangerous, just as uncertain. But she was ready. She had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. The unicorn was waiting. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silver glow across the now peaceful forest. The oppressive weight of Malgore's dark magic had lifted, and the air felt lighter, as if the very earth itself had exhaled in relief. Rose stood amidst the trees, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword, the glowing blade now dimming after the battle's end. Her body ached from the intensity of the fight, but her heart swelled with pride. Thistle hovered beside her, his wings buzzing in a quiet rhythm, his tiny face alight with a broad grin. "We did it, Rose!" "The forest is safe. The curse is finally broken." Rose smiled, her gaze sweeping the forest around her. The trees stood tall, their leaves rustling gently in the night breeze. The once ominous shadows had receded, and in their place, the forest had come alive with the soft whisper of the wind and the glow of bioluminescent plants that illuminated the path ahead. "We did," Rose said, her voice filled with both exhaustion and exhilaration. She looked at her friend, the brave little creature who had been her steadfast companion throughout the journey. "You were incredible, Thistle. I couldn't have done it without you." The tiny squirrel puffed out his chest, preening. "I did my best. But let's not forget, it was your courage that made all the difference. You fought with everything you had." Rose glanced down at her sword. It had been her most trusted companion, the one tool that had guided her through countless dangers. But she knew it wasn't just the blade that had brought her victory. It was her resilience, her determination, and the lessons she had learned along the way. She had grown so much since the beginning of her journey, stronger, braver, and wiser. The air shifted as something magical stirred around them, a soft and ethereal glow enveloping the clearing. Rose felt a warmth fill her chest, a sense of contentment and peace that she hadn't felt in what seemed like forever. It was as if the forest itself was congratulating her. Suddenly, a light flashed in the distance, and the ground beneath their feet rumbled gently. Rose's heart skipped a beat as she turned toward the source of the light. Through the trees, a figure began to emerge, its silhouette outlined by the shimmering glow. It was the unicorn, the creature she had risked everything to save. Its mane shimmered like strands of moonlight, its hooves barely touching the earth as it trotted toward them. Rose could feel the magic of the unicorn radiating from its being, a sense of pure wonder and beauty that made everything else in the world fade away. The unicorn stopped in front of her, lowering its head in a graceful bow. Its eyes were deep pools of wisdom and kindness, and for a moment, Rose felt as if the entire world was speaking to her through its gaze. She had succeeded, but it wasn't just about defeating Malgore. It was about restoring balance to a world that had been on the brink of chaos. "You did it!" The unicorn's voice rang out, gentle but powerful. "You saved this forest, Rose. You broke the curse and freed me. You've proven yourself worthy." Tears welled up in Rose's eyes as she knelt before the majestic creature, her heart full of gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you. You gave me the strength to keep going." The unicorn stepped forward, nudging her gently with its horn. "You had the strength within you all along, Rose. I merely reminded you of what you were capable of." The forest around them seemed to echo with the unicorn's words. The trees swayed, the stars twinkled brighter, and the creatures of the woods came out from their hiding places to join in the celebration. It was a moment of unity, of peace, and of triumph. As the unicorn raised its head, the stars above flickered and shimmered in response, casting a shower of stardust down upon the clearing. The air felt charged with energy, alive with the magic of the world coming back into balance.